Well, welcome to Kissing the Cod. I am Janet Sheriff, your host, and we are back again with Mr. Peter Dimmell, part 2. Hello, Peter.
Good day. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing?
Can't complain. We're on the right side of the sod. That's always a good thing.
Every day, right?
Yes, that's for sure.
We had such a great conversation last time. I didn't realize how long it was going. So we're just going to pick up on where we were chatting, I guess, 2 days ago, right?
Yeah, we have Bundy. Yeah, that's right.
So I wanted to start with the picture that we put up on the notice is of you out in the field. And you were telling me the story of the photo. I love it.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's it's interesting how this business how you enjoy it certain times. There's always tough times, but there's days where you say you understand why you do it and why people do it generally. 2 years in a row, that picture was taken out on an island called Barhaven Island, which is at the north end of Placentia Bay, which is in the ocean in Newfoundland. And myself and 3-4 other people have an interest we stake some claims out there. We call ourselves the Newfoundland Prospecting Syndicate. It's just a loose alliance. We're all supposed to put in a certain amount of time and we pay our own costs and that sort of thing. And we staked this property out on Barhaven Island. And two prospectors involved, 2 geologists, myself and another young fellow works with Marathon Gold, Dylan Abbott, Norm Mercer, who's the president of the Newfoundland Labrador Prospectors Association, and 2 Sweet Apples prospectors from Glovertown. Anyway, two Septembers in a row, we have gone out to this island. Now, this island, we go from Garden Cove, so we drive from St. John's to Garden Cove. We get on a 39-foot longliner and we go down to the area. He takes us in, drops us off, and then he goes, what does he do while he's waiting for us? Well, he goes scalloping. So he just goes up and down the area and takes scallops. And he picks us up later on, and we come back and go back home with it. In the meantime, he's got these fresh scallops that he charges $12 a pound for.
Love it.
2 years in a row, and they've been perfect days, flat calm and sun coming down, and you're going down in Placentia Bay, and this is called the Inner Passage, and it's just beautiful. Okay, so anyway, that's the context of it. So myself and Dylan we went one way, and the other guys went to another area. So that's the way we divided up. And we had taken we'd gone the longer tour, longer area. I'd been in there the year before, but we hadn't gone around the island, around that pond. So Dylan went one way, I went the other way, and I went. There was a chunk of quartz on the side of the pond. I looked at it, took some samples and stuff, and then I went to get up and on the bank, and the bank was maybe 2 feet high, something like that. And I climbed up on it. I got on a knob, and if you know Newfoundland, we call it go withy. It's just really hard walking. I stepped on this knob, and somehow I slipped backwards. Of course, when I slipped backwards, I had rocks in my pack sack, and it took me backwards. I swung around somehow. I ended up back on my back in the pond. I got completely soaked. I mean, I was still, my upper body, most of my upper body was still on the beach, but the rest of me was in the water. And I just said, how in the heck did I do that? I mean, I didn't hurt myself, luckily, because I mean, these things could be things. And when I met Dylan, I went when we at the end of the pond, when the picture was taken, I was just drying out. The water was running off me. But I mean, it didn't really interrupt the day, but it was so nice. It just when you do that, it was a tough day. That's a hard walk too. Up into that area, a lot of bog and a lot of things. And if you walk on bogs, you know how hard they are. And a lot of this go-withy stuff, as they call it. But we followed, as much as we could, we follow moose trails. Moose are really good at making trails through this really tough country there. So anyway, that's the story of that picture. So you can tell I'm a little bit, I don't know, wet anyway.
Yeah, I loved it when you sent it. I knew that was the picture even before I had the story.
Yeah.
So, what is go with thee?
It's a Newfoundland term. It describes sort of really hard country. It's a mixture of what we call Labrador tea, but it may not be. But it's humpy ground. It's ground that has humps in it and it has stuff growing everywhere. Sometimes a lot of small spruce. We have a term for spruce, which I won't use right now, but it comes up about waist high, and we have in our geological fraternity, we have a term for that here, but I won't mention that right now. Anybody that's listening to this that's been here knows what we call it. But that whole type of thing, there's rocks underneath it, there's holes in that stuff, and it's just very, very difficult to walk on. It's just, I come out of some of those areas sometimes, and I get cramps because I'm not drinking enough, not taking enough fluids. And it's just different on your legs. You're just not the same. Walking a kilometer and that is probably like walking 10 kilometers on regular ground. It's just very, very tough. And I'm not sure where the term came from, but it's GOWITHY, go with it.
Go with thee. Okay. Yeah, I've written it down. I love the unique dialect in Newfoundland. And it throws people off that haven't been there or aren't from there. But it's got the most amazing terms. And used one last time we talked about an accordion shape. It was Harry. I can't remember what you said.
Harry Hibbs, yes, famous accordion player here in Newfoundland.
And
he died a while ago, but yeah, very, very famous.
And that is what you use to describe how the land.
Yeah, well, that was Hank Williams, professor at Memorial, well known. He's actually in the Mining Hall of Fame. We managed to get him in there because he was one of the first guys in the academic field that recognized that Newfoundland, first of all, was subject to these plate tectonics. Plate tectonics is just a relatively new thing, probably in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, when it was recognized. Up until that time, that hadn't been recognized. People always looked at Africa and South America, North America, et cetera, sort of said, gee, doesn't that look like you could take Africa and move it over and fit it together? And that's essentially what you could do, because what's happened is they moved apart. But that's happened, of course, all over the world. Hank Williams took that information and looked at it in the context of Newfoundland, and then said, okay, here's what we've got. So this is this part on the eastern part, as I described the last time, called the Avalon Zone, which is Morocco down through Newfoundland, right down to the Carolinas. Then the other side was the North American stuff, and some of that included the Dalradian through up into the UK, and also, and everything in between was the Proto-Atlantic Ocean. And what happened is it just went, it opened, it closed, it opened, it closed. He described that as like an accordion when you're going like this, as the Harry Hibbs effect. And again, that Hank's gone a few years now too, and he was a great guy for that sort of thing. He used to lead tours across this island, and people came from all over the world to take those tours because he could demonstrate so well how the geology, how this geology and plate tectonics fitted in. He would have been really interested in the latest discovery, certainly in central Newfoundland with the gold, because that hadn't been known at the time.
Wow. And he was at Memorial?
He was at Memorial University, yeah. Yeah, well-known professor. And like I said, we managed to get him into the Mining Hall of Fame, mainly on that basis of the fact that he was one of the first to use plate tectonics and put it in the context of mineral exploration and how important it was to mineral exploration.
Interesting. And came up with the Harry Hibbs.
Harry Hibbs effect.
I love it.
Yeah.
When we were talking last, we kind of left a couple of questions hanging out there. I just wanted to go back to a bit. One was I brought up, which was hard times coming in the financial markets. The thing that gave me, it has me, my interest peaked is whenever there's a depressionary time, there's gold discoveries and booms. And I was bringing it up because I hope that's what happens with Newfoundland. That, as hard times come, Newfoundland has and always does have a way of benefiting from it.
Yes, I mean that's true. The only negative side of that, I looked yesterday, and I don't follow the gold price very much, but yesterday I noted it's down to about 1730, which is low for what it's been in the last while, and it's I think due to these so-called recessionary times that are coming up. The problem if gold drops too much, what happens is the interest in gold development, exploration and development drops off also, which means you can't raise money for it. Mm-hmm. And Newfoundland would be subject to that also. So I am a little bit concerned about that. I think right now the companies that are working here are fairly well funded. It's not like in the old days, like we said last time there, 300 grand was a big budget. I mean, most people here now have millions, and that's something that hasn't happened for a long time. So hopefully we can ride out 2 or 3 years of a bad time. But what it does do, it does make people hunker down more. It makes them drill less. It makes, as I said, if you can raise flow, you'll always raise some flow through. But you won't raise necessarily the hard dollars, and that is something that can cause companies to fail. If they don't have hard dollars, they can't keep. Usually, what happens is the main people behind it start putting money into it just to maintain the company. So I'm a little concerned with that. I think the potential is there. Certainly, if the money's being spent. I noticed Lab Gold had a news release today, which one of their better intersections. K9 had one today also, which was a very good good news release. Huge intersections. I think they 127 meters of 0.61 grams, which that's a lot of gold. I mean, I think Detour Gold was mining about 0.5 gram of gold. You start getting intersections like that, that shows that the amount of gold that's here in Newfoundland that really hadn't been noted before is there. And every time I see those things, and everybody said, well, that's, not, but the global amount of gold in 127 meters of 0.61 is fairly substantial.
Yeah, the market gets all excited about a high grade and big numbers. They don't always appreciate that a gram per ton is a mine if you've got the right amount, and consistency helps, right? So a big step like that is good. It's just not the flashy stuff but that's I'll take it.
Yeah. I will too.
The other, my light just went out. That's okay. The other question that we kind of started and then didn't really finish was we're talking about how in the past so many people went into the bush or into camps and stayed for a long time, and it's changed now with the shift work to be more accommodating to family life, and does that impact the industry in it's obviously good and bad. Good for families, slows down the process, but just wanted to give you a chance to talk about that a bit.
Well, I think, like I said, it was something that had to be done. We would have very few people in this industry in today's world if we as an industry didn't realize the value of family and the value of just people actually not getting burned out. And it's so easy to get burned out. I've experienced people, I've been in the field, with people. I mean, some people can get burned out after a week if they're just not, they're not in the right thing, they're with the wrong people, that sort of thing. In today's world, this 2 in, 2 out makes, to me, good sense, because nobody gets burned out then. You do your 2 weeks in, you do good work, you're concerned, you work at it. Yeah, you look forward to getting back out and getting back with your family or your girlfriend or your wife or whatever it is. But point of it is that you're not burned out because you're there. You know you're going to be home for 2 weeks, and then you can do things during that 2 weeks time that there has to be things that have to be done. You have to look after your banking. You have to do this. Now online stuff, you can do it a lot more easy, but it's still not the same as being out. So I think it's something that's been realized for a number of years that was required to be done, and the industry has gone to that situation. I mean, it's going to be a scattered time that you've got to fly somebody in for a month because it's just not worth bringing other people in and things. But there will be people that will do that, but they won't do it for the rest of their life. And that's the thing about it. You want to retain people. You have to make it so that they have a good life. They can make good money, yes, and they can also have a really good family life and life outside of geology.
Yeah, I worked with a guy who, once he went into a camp or out in the bush, he wouldn't want to come out. And we could see that he was getting burned out, but he wouldn't leave. We'd actually have to go and get him and send him home. And one time we found he had snuck back, and he was looking at adjacent property, and we found him. It was like, no, you must go home.
Yeah. I it's funny, over the years, I haven't run into too many, but I have run into some that really get bushed fairly, as we call it, bushed very, very quickly. And I don't care who you are, after you've been there for a while, your intention. I mean, what do you do when you're in the bush? I've said this to my wife way back. One thing about being in the bush, you don't really worry about anything else, at least in those days, because you didn't have Wi-Fi, you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have any of that. When you went in the field, you were in the field. And all you did was you got up in the morning, you had your breakfast, you went out in the field, did your work, you came back, you plotted up your work, because there was no such thing of having computer stuff. You plotted up by hand most times on maps that somebody had given you, and using your compass about where you were and this sort of thing. And that's what you did. And then you got up in the morning, you did the same. Next morning, you did the same thing. And that's all it was. It was a very simple life. Mm-hmm. But that simple life, after a couple of weeks, starts to grate. You think, geez, I'd love to go out and have a beer, or something like that. Not to say that some of the camps didn't have beer in them, they did. But it's just not the same. And that's the recognition of that, I think, has changed our industry much for the better.
I was working in a mining camp my first time, and I'd been there a few days. I missed my kids. And I asked one of the guys that had been in the industry 20, 25 years, like, how do you do it? And he said, well, when I come to work, I just work for 2 weeks. I work and I do the best I can, and I focus. And when I go home, I just do my family, and that's all I do. And I do the best I can. And it worked for him. And I thought it made it, but it doesn't work for everybody. Right? No,
it doesn't. And I mean, that's going to happen. Some people do not want to be in the field for that much. I run into people like that after their first summer. They say, I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't want to do it. Now, most people, certainly my age and that, don't spend that much time in the field. Mm-hmm. And usually your first 8-10 years, you're quite a bit field oriented. But as you go beyond that, you become the managers, and the managers do not tend to be in the field that much. However, they still get in the field, which is something they want to do because they want to keep it in. I am talking to Tim Froud yesterday again, and he's heading down to go sit on a drill for a couple of weeks, and he's the CEO of the company.
Good for him. That sounds like him.
Yeah, well, but he likes it. He really enjoys it. Now, you can argue about whether a CEO should be sitting on a drill, But if you can't get anybody else right now, and we have 5 drills going right now, we being Silcoman, 3 at Moosehead, 1 at the Kraken, which is the lithium project, and this where Tim's going to be is the Grey River project, which has great potential, gold project. So I spoke to him yesterday. We have a news release out today on some of the Moosehead drilling, and that's what I was involved with him on yesterday. And he headed out to Grand Falls after that, and then he was meeting Steve Stairs, and they were heading down there first of all to go to Kraken to have a look at it, and then they were heading down to Great River and go in. So that that's what some people want to do. At my age, it's too much. Last time I was on a drill job, I said, well, I really can't do it anymore the same way. We need young people in there, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I can't go look at a drill or look at core, but it means that the actual physical part of being on a drill it really gets tough as you get older.
Yeah. Well, so you bring up something that makes me think about sort of the toolkit of what a geologist needs. And I think it's harder to get the young geologists out in the field as long as you used to go. And there's a lot more work on artificial intelligence and database and all of these other things. How do you see all of that fitting in with the necessity of being on the ground, like looking at the rocks? Like, is that, do you see the toolkit expanding?
Well, it definitely is. I really stayed away from the AI stuff. I figure I'm too old to get involved in that, and to really, I don't really need to understand. I mean, I understand what it's doing. It's taking data, it's doing iterations of that data. I mean, essentially what we did with the brain,
Yeah.
but doing it, hugely faster. I mean, the speed of the thing. But again, it's only as good as the data that has been provided. And that's always thing, garbage in, garbage out. They've always said with things like that. So but it is the future. It's AIs in everything these days, and it's in the stock market. And actually, that's probably one of the things affecting the stock market, because you get the AI playing these little bumps in the thing, which affects the overall stocks, and can really hurt some companies. But the bottom line is the students coming out today, the young geologists coming out today, they're much more computer literate than we ever were. They are very familiar with all of the requirements, the GPS situation, and AI is part of that. They're just right on top of that sort of thing. Most places now, when they're logging, they log into computers. I never logged into a computer. I always did it by hand. I would enter it in afterwards in the evening, go into Excel or something and put it in there. I'll give you an example about how things have changed. Most people are using this program called MX, which I'm not familiar with. I know what it does, but I know Newfoundland Gold's using it, Silcoman's using it, etc. MX would not provide a drill log. It didn't have the capability to provide a drill log. It could give you information on it. And when we asked about it as more manager type things on it, we were told, well, it wasn't required. Nobody needed, all the data is in the database. Why do you need a drill log? Well, the reason you need a drill log, number one, is the government asked for one. So, that's a good reason to give a drill log. And the second thing is that's what allows prospectors to take data that is otherwise unavailable to them and make something out of it. If you can get a drill log that says, here's the geology, here's the assay results for that, then anybody can use that. You don't have to go through a database. The database can still be accessible to you if you want it, but if you're not familiar with it or you don't want to use it, then you've still got something you can use. And I think that's something that they tend to forget. Now, MX has developed one, at least I think for both. I don't know whether Newfound did their own. Silcoman, we went back to MX and said, we want a drill log form that we can take out of MX. All the data's there. We want to be able to take that out and make a drill log of it. And they did provide it to us, and we now have that. but to me, that was just an example of how that was driven by people that were not in the field and didn't see the value to having a drill log, right? So, those type of things, it affects everybody that works in this business, particularly the prospectors.
Yeah. And I'm going back to, you would handwrite at the drill site, log, and then put it in the computer later.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a leap and a question. Does that mean you look at the rocks more?
No, I don't think necessarily. Most companies now photograph all their core, and indicate. I know what Newfound does. They do everything on it. I mean, it's amazing what is done with drill core now, and that's not unusual in the industry. You run it through different spectral things, and you get data that we could never get, that you can't see. A lot of alteration, for example, in drill core is not, you can't see it, but if you do a spectral analysis of that core, yes, you can pick it up. And that spectral analysis can say if you are close or if you are further away from where mineralization could be once you make those associations. So it is there, but whether I haven't actually seen, I haven't seen too many people actually logging lately. The Sokoman, I was in the Sokoman drill facility there on the week before last, and we were touring, so we actually took them away from what they should be doing, which was logging core. So unfortunately, and that's something I always used to hate as a project geologist, when the bosses had come in, because they disrupt your whole routine, right? But it was one of those things. And I kept saying to the guys, look, appreciate what you're doing here, but look, don't let us take, well, I said, what can you do? You're the bosses. So, but it is. Now, I think certainly on the Sokoman side, looking at it, I know the guys that are logging are doing it in great detail, even though they're logging into a computer. Most of us, the way we log anyway, and I've logged this for years, is you log with a grease pencil. You mark on your foliations, you pick out, circle bits of EG if you see them, and you do those type of things, and you note. I used to write little notes on the core so that when I was writing it up, I could actually do it. So I go ahead and I do that over 5-10 meters or something, and then I'd go, but that was a written log, so it was much more detailed. First thing you do when you go look at a core thing, you just take notes down about intersection. Okay, we went from Mayfic to Felsic at 103 meters or something, that type of thing. Right? So, but no, I think most of the geos logging today still look at it very, very carefully, but they have more data available to them once that's done. Right.
A combination of old school and new school.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Last time we talked, we never got into Rambler.
No. Right.
That was one of my big things I wanted to talk about. I wanted you to talk about Rambler.
Well, that was a very interesting time in my life, I'll tell you. Yeah, it's
I'm just gonna let you go.
Well, okay. It's interesting how things happened at the time that Rambler closed in 1982 when it was Consolidated Rambler. It was owned by K.C. Irving Group in New Brunswick, and closed in 82. The government declared it undeveloped in about 87 or something like that. And and that meant then they went and they asked for bids on it to work on the property. And one of the reasons it closed was the Rambler North property. They were mining down, and they were actually right at the boundary of the Rambler North property, and they couldn't go any further. They were down about 2,700 feet vertical, and still had massive sulfides, still had all the ore there and that, but they couldn't go any further essentially, and they couldn't make a deal with a company called Selco, which was there at the time. So anyway, it closed.
Just for the benefit of people that don't know the commodity.
Oh, it's gold. It was copper, Sorry, it's a copper mine, yeah. And it operated in the 60s, it started, and it went to 82. They mined lower grade stuff, 1% stuff, but in the early 70s, they hit a zone called the Ming Zone, which is 3.5%, 4% copper with really good gold values. I mean, you could get up to 10 grams of gold in the massive sulfide copper zone, right? So really expensive, good stuff, and made them a lot of money at that time. Anyway, closed in 82. It was declared undeveloped in about 87, 5 years later. The government asked for bids, and a group called the Rambler Joint Venture got it. Teck was involved with that, and a couple of other junior companies that put the money up. Teck was more of an advisor than anything else, but they went for 5 years. They had a 5-year thing on it, so that took them to 1992, and they actually discovered a new zone called the Ming West deposit. And that was discovered at surface, and it essentially parallel to the Ming Zone. But they couldn't find enough to go on with it. So they essentially, after 5 years, they turned it back to the government. And the government asked for bids. Now, around that time, I was working with Krinor Corporation. We closed in 1992 in Newfoundland. And so I didn't have anything. I became a consultant as such. And one of the places I had claims of my own was in the Bay Verte area, in the Rambler area. And because I'd worked with Krinor Corporation had acquired the Rambler North property. So I did a deal with Krinor where I would option the Rambler North property. I also had a call from Tony Ransom, who was my boss at the time. He was by that time Homestake had taken over Krinor. They were in Vancouver first, but then they closed everything in Canada, moved to Homestake's office in San Francisco. And I got a call from Tony one day, and he said, Peter, I got to tell you, we own, and Krinor had, that's right, missed this part, but Krinor had bought, because Krinor had been involved with the Pine Cove deposit, had taken that to about 200 and something thousand ounces. There was Nugget Pond had been found at that time, and then there was a bunch of other ones in the same area, small gold deposits, maybe totaling 500,000 or 600,000 ounces. And the thought was, Krinor thought, maybe we could put together a central milling concept. So they bought the mill, the Rambler mill, from I guess the Rambler joint venture. Anyway, they acquired it, and the cost was like 1.5 million, something like that, for 1,500 ton a day, but complete a wooden mill. I mean, it was a beautiful mill, but it was old, and it had collapsed a little bit in one area over the grinding bay. Anyway, so they owned the mill. Krinor owned the mill, and Krinor owned this Rambler North joint venture, or Rambler North property. So I did a deal with them for the Rambler. The Rambler North. I did a deal with them. I had claims in the area anyway, and I had a call from Tony this day, and he said, "Look, we want to sell that mill. That central milling concept fell through. I want to sell the mill. How about if I give you 30%, whatever the price is? We give you, So I'm thinking if I can sell for $500,000, I make 150. Da 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 da." So I went in to see a buddy of mine in Bayvert, Sam Blagden, who's well known in mineral exploration and mining. Actually, he was involved with most of the mines in Bayvert, the asbestos mines, a lot of other things involved in exploration. And he was everybody knew Sam. Anyway, I went in and I was talking to him one day, and I mentioned to him about this. He said, "I got a mill." He said, "Well, we can't let the mill go." I said, "Well, no, I guess we can't. That's right." And I said, "The tragedy, because somebody just take it away, it would disappear, and then we wouldn't be able to do anything with it, right?" So he said, "Why don't we buy it?" And I said, "What do you mean buy it?" And I said, "Well," he said, "We'll buy it. We'll offer to buy it from Krinor." They don't want it. They don't want the liability, right? I said, "Well, what would we offer them?" And he said, "Let's offer them 10 grand and $1 a ton royalty." I said, "Well," I said, I never really thought about that. Anyway, sure enough, I called up Tony the next day. I said, "Tony, look, we'll take that off your hands." But and he said, "What do you have?" I said, 10 grand and $1 a ton for royalty for anything we put through it. And he said, well, let me get back to you. Anyway, calls me back next day and he said, you got a deal. I said, okay, that's good. So we formed a company called Ming Minerals. We put 10 grand in each, Sam and I, and we paid 10 grand to Corona. And now we own the mill, and we owned the Rambler North property, and the government was asking for bids on the main Rambler property, which is where the ore zones were at that time. Although the Rambler North had these extensions on them, which was important. So of course we had, as Ming Minerals, we had the inside track on it because we had the right things together. And so we went out to Vancouver back and forth getting trips, and Brian Peckford, an ex-premier of the province, somehow he was involved. Interesting, our company was called Ming Minerals Inc, based on Ming's Bight, which is very close to the Rambler property. Anyway, Brian Peckford was involved with a company called Ming Financial Corporation. Just happened, nothing to do with us, but that, of course, it's B.C, and I guess they were raising Asian money stuff. So anyway, we did a deal with them where they put 2.2 million into Ming Minerals to earn a 70% interest, and Sam and I retained 30%. And anyway, so we then applied. I guess we had the rights by that time. The government had given us the rights because it made sense. You know, to give it to anyone else didn't make any sense because we were back in the same situation we were in '82. Anyway, so we got it, 2.2 million. We had to refurbish the grinding bay, fix the roof and various things, get permits, do this and everything. Our intention was to mine the Ming West deposit, which we did. We started off, so we started 94, I guess, something like that, putting it together. And we went down the old Ming decline and then just swung off that and swung over to the Ming West. And we mined the Ming West down to 360 vertical, and we mined it back to surface, and about 150,000 tons. And at the time we made about 18 million revenue, about 6 million of that was profit. 6 million was smelting, refining, 6 million was operating costs. And anyway, then the copper price dropped from $1.20 a pound to 80 cents a pound. So what Rambler Mines did subsequent to that, what they've done since, is essentially what we intended to do, which was to refurbish the shaft, go down the 1800 level, continue on with the zones at depth. And the 360, the reason we stopped there, price was one thing, but the tons per vertical foot weren't there. It was about 30 feet long, maybe 10 feet thick. And you just couldn't, the value of the ore wasn't worth the cost of the decline, which is, that happens in these things. So anyway, we said, well, what can we do? There's gold deposits around there. There was a part of a gold circuit at Rambler. So we actually refurbished the gold circuit and tried to operate, tried to do gold. And we essentially blew our brains out. We almost went bankrupt. But yeah, I think the last month we operated, we lost 400,000, I think, and that was, everybody was saying, well, that's down quite a bit. Well, yeah, but we don't have any money left. We can't do any. So, you know, we didn't leave any big bills paying. We left some of the major companies with some bills, but none of all the local crowd got paid and stuff. So, which was something we were glad about because it affects them much more. Some of the I guess it was more of the explosives companies and things like that, who, you know, anyway, bottom line is we closed. And I still, at that point, Ming Minerals, I was still a part owner of. Sam's daughter came to me with a proposal to take over the whole thing. By that time, she'd acquired the 70%. I still own 15%. She'd acquired the Ming Minerals, Ming Financials 70%, and came to me and offered, you know, said buy it. I said, so, well, what are you going to give me? Anyway, bottom line is I agreed to do it. She'd take over the liabilities, and I would get a 0.5% NSR. And that's the way it went. Shortly after that, the Altius, she did a deal with Altius Minerals, and Altius then formed Rambler Mines with money from the UK, and Rambler went in production. And because of the 0.5% NSR, I've been getting NSR payments every quarter for about 10 years now. So, so that 10 grand investment wasn't bad. And unfortunately, my partner Sam, he didn't get to see the mine in production. He got killed in a car accident on the Trans-Canada in '95, shortly before we actually opened. So he was the president of the company. I was vice president. And so I took over as president. And I mean, that was my first and last experience at actual mining. We had a good staff there that really knew how to do copper, but we got into gold and we really didn't know what we were doing. We hired some people that didn't know what they were doing, obviously. And anyway, so Rambler, once it got going, it's been going for 10 years. They've got huge potential there. They've always had a bit of undercapitalization problems, but you know, they're making it. It seems like things are turning for them now, and they're getting better. And like I said, it's they persevered through some tough times, and of course, with the copper price these days, they're doing much better than they were in the past.
And do they get a gold credit now?
Oh yes, yeah, they get there are a lot of their. I'd have to look at it again, but I get updates on this. They're producing every quarter. They're not producing huge amounts, mainly because their main they're mining. I think they're producing about 1,100 tons a month now, and those tons are mostly yeah. They are mostly lower grade. Their grade right now is about 1.6% copper, and they're blending the high grade, which is the 3 to 4% stuff, which has the gold in it, with a stringer zone, which has many more tons, but it doesn't have much in the way of copper or silver or gold credits. But I mean, the point of it is they've got about 20 years reserves there. As they continue on down, and the upper stuff, the high grade now is deeper, but the low grade is I think they're 700 feet down, so they're fairly close. You know, they've got to do some things, and they're working on that. There was a shaft called the boundary shaft, for obvious reasons, went to 1800 level, and that would have been, if they could have refurbished that in the beginning, kept that there. It had a hoist there. They had a crusher underground, which when in '82 they took that out, but they couldn't really leave it there anyway. But that's, I think, the ideal thing is you go back to that 1800 level, you refurbish the shaft, you put a good hoist in there, and you put an underground crusher. So as your high grade gets hauled there and goes straight up, you're not competing on that decline with the stuff up above, which is where more of the tonnage is coming up. So yeah, I mean, it's a really good mine in the sense of the grade, the ore there is especially the high grade. I mean, it's second to none. I've never seen grades like that in anything. That we stopped on the 360 level. Like I said, it was 10% copper across the whole face. It was just spectacular. Anyway, wow. That's life.
Yeah, that's how it goes, right?
Yep.
The central milling never took off?
No, you could never. There was 3-4 companies involved. Corona, the Nugget Pond was Bitech, James Wade. There was who else was there? Oh, Noranda was involved with the stuff on the Point Rousse Peninsula there. So you had all these companies, and everybody thought theirs was best. And I mean, you know, how do you do it? How do you do you batch this stuff, or do you whatever it is? And it never did go. But you know, at the same time, the 2 of those deposits did go into production: Pine Cove with Anaconda, and Bitech, the Nugget Pond with Richmond, and both made money. So you know, it shows that it's there. The Noranda one, Stoggertite, has been mined a little bit by Anaconda also, and they are still mining in that area with the Argyle right now. So they are, you know, doing it. The stuff further out, Devil's Cove, as it's called, it's a vein type deposit. And they also have the Romeo and Juliet veins too on that area, on the Anaconda, and they're working on things. They're narrow veins, so little tougher to mine with visible gold in the quartz veins. Right?
Hmm. Yeah.
But the whole Bay Verde area is really ripe. And I don't know, a bit of an aside, but this is something to do. One of the reasons I was in the Bay Verde area with Corona Corporation, got in there in the southern, the Packet Harbor Group is the mafic volcanic unit that hosts the Rambler deposits. But it's in areas where they have felsic volcanic associated, so which is typical for VMS in no style. Corona back in 80, I guess when I was in there, 87, option before I got involved with them. I was working with Corona in New Brunswick at the time. That was that period when I was left Newfoundland, 82 to 89. I was in New Brunswick. And they flew in airborne looking for VMS stuff on the southern part of that Packet Harbor, and didn't get any indication of VMS or volcanogenic massive sulfide Rambler style things. But they did find, once they got on the ground, found some good gold mineralization. A vein called the Brass Buckle vein, particularly, is one, which is actually on my property now. And it's a narrow vein, quartz pyrite vein, but it runs like 200, 250 grams per ton. I mean, it's huge and a lot of visible gold in it, but it's massive pyrite and quartz. Really neat little thing. You can take it about 25 meters long. It's had a bit of drilling on it, but and not really successful drilling, but I mean, it has to go somewhere. There's at least some of it there. Associated with quartz porphyries and contact with mafic volcanic. So again, not a bad geological environment for it. Anyway, one of the things that when I got involved with Corona in 88, we decided to do a regional till survey over the Packet Harbor. And we used Overburden Drilling Management as the company that would do the gold grain counts for us. And we developed this huge till anomaly, which I mentioned in the last segment there. And took 17 years, took me 17 years, because I ended up, once Corona left, I acquired the ground and kept working at it with got options to various companies over the years. And anyway, we traced it back in 17 years later, and now have this zone called the SB zone, which is one claim over the source of that till anomaly. But there was another little till anomaly in that area, and it was 4 samples that were over 10 grains of gold, and they in a line. And in 1992, this was after Corona closed, I said to first year that I was working where I wasn't getting paid by Corona, I said to my daughter, I said, I'm going to go over and prospect that area, because that part was Crown land at the time. I said, I'm going to go over and prospect that area. I said, because I think there's something in that area, and I've never been there. She was 16. I said, would you like to accompany me, go over with me? And she said, okay, Dad, I think I'll do that. So anyway, we took off and we went over and we stayed in the old Rambler staff house, which was still standing at the time. It's been raised since. And the first day we went in and we were going around looking at this in this area, and there were 10 samples, let's say 10 till samples, 10 to 15 grains of gold. Background was probably 1 or 2 in the area. So it sort of made sense to look along that area. And anyway, we'd taken a few samples and everything, and we hit this cut line that turned out had been cut in 1988. And we're walking up the line. There was a bunch of trees had blown over subsequent to the line being cut. And underneath it was this boulder, a rusty boulder, quartz boulder with rust all through it and stuff. Anyway, I put my pack on the stump and I walked over and smacked it, and looked at it, smacked it again, looked at it, said, that's visible gold, right? Anyway, I said, passed it to my daughter and I said, Chrissy, that's, my daughter's Krista, but I call her Chrissy. I said, Chrissy, that's visible gold. She said, Dad, that's visible gold, right? Well, you wouldn't, but there were thumbnail-sized pieces of visible gold in this quartz boulder, right? My daughter was 43 yesterday. And I just, this morning before I came out, I did a story on that, because I found some rocks the other day where she had written PD7 was my sample number for that. And she'd put P and brackets and daughter. 7. So I found those the other day when I was looking for something else, and I said, anyway, I took a picture of it, and I took a picture of the visible gold and one of the better samples, and I sent it off to her. I haven't talked to her since, but I was talking to her the other day. Anyway, the bottom line is we found that. I said, we've got to stake this because it was Crown land. So we spent I don't think we started that day. I think we started the next day, and it was raining, and we were both in rain gear. And I was going ahead with, that time was ground staking. So, and it went across the Gull Pond Road, which is south of Rambler. And we went east from the road, and we had to go 1.2 kilometers on the north side and 800 meters down. It was 6 claims, it was what it was. So 400 meters per claim per side. And anyway, we started on the road, went over, went down, we came back. And as we went across the road, I was going ahead blazing the trees. She was coming behind, putting flagging tape on. And the mosquitoes and the flies, I mean, it was one of the hardest days I think I've ever spent in the field. Anyway, we got to the thing, went across a little bog, and I cut a claim post there. And daughter said, Chrissy said, well, Dad, we should quit now. We finish this tomorrow. And I said, that's a good idea. And I had to take my fingers and pry them off the axe, because I wasn't used to doing it, right? And we went back to the staff house, both had real hot baths, sat in there for a while. And then the next day we finished it off, and then went back to, and then drove back to St. John's through a terrible storm across the isthmus here down the Avalon area here. Anyway, subsequent to that, I went in and followed it up, and I did find the Chrissy Zone on the other side on the east side of the highway. And I had that since 92. I optioned it to Rambler about year 20. And they had to put a mining lease on it. At that time, you couldn't extend it past year 20. They put a mining lease on it. They had it for 3 years, really didn't do a lot of work on it. And, unfortunately, they were going to drill it, never did. It was drilled once with Silver Spruce, one of the companies I was associated with probably early 2011, 2012, something like that. Mm-hmm. And there's some good intersection there, but there's 2 80-meter long zones, Boudinage zone and a shear zone, 2 80-meter long zones with good mineralization up to 5-6 meters wide, quartz veining and good values and things, which is now, anyway, the bottom line is I couldn't keep it because it was $3,000 or 35 grand a year or two just for the cost of the mining leases. So it's gone back to the government, and it hasn't been opened yet. It's still, they haven't opened it for staking yet. So when it does get opened, it'll get some interest, I'm sure, especially from some of the companies around there. I think there's a chance for probably 20 or 30,000 ounces, at least what's there now. If it's Boudinage this way, it's probably Boudinage down dip too, so the drilling makes difficult too. I think there's some potential there down the road. So anyway, that was the only thing that I could really say that I've actually found myself without working with a company. That was all me looking at it using company data. It was interesting because 1988, junior company had been in there and had put the grid in that resulted in these trees falling over, and they had mapped that area, by walking the lines right afterwards. And then they had a big windstorm in '89. By that time, they were gone. So I don't think anyone would have missed it if it had been fallen, if the trees had fallen prior to that. But if the trees hadn't fallen, there's no way you would have seen that boulder. And that just goes to show how difficult it is on these things, right? Anyway, bottom line is they had done geochemistry, and the geochem showed high, 200, 300 ppb gold to the east of the road, which is what I followed up. And I found the zone. I could pick up the zone coming along in outcrops. So it wasn't difficult once you did that, right? But they had run out of money. Typical thing in '88. That was a tough year, and ran out of money and didn't get a chance to do the follow-up. So they done all the preparatory work. So anyway, that's the story of our lives, isn't it?
Yeah, I know that it gets expensive holding the claims after a while.
Yeah.
Do you have a picture of that, the sample that your daughter took still?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
That's why I say I sent her a bunch today. I've got some really good samples of that. I mean, it was the boulder was probably 2-3 foot by 1 foot or 1.5 foot. I mean, it was a big chunk of rock. Now, if you go there, it's getting all mossed over now. But I mean, I still know exactly where it is. Because we had a baseline in there. The baseline wasn't very far off the baseline on that grid, and we reutilized that grid a number of times. We cut it and stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's intersections there, like 1.5 meters of 9 grams, that type of stuff. So it needs more work, but anyway,
Wow.
when it comes open, I'm sure there'll be lots of interest. So
Now it's online staking.
yes, that's right. Yeah.
And when did it switch to online from ground?
Gee, that's a good question. It's been quite a few years now, but it certainly wasn't in place when Boise's Bay was on the go. So in the early 90s, I would say is probably after 2010, around that time, something, or the late 2000s, in that range. I mean, I'm sure I could figure it out exactly, but it's in the midst of time now.
I think the online staking really was to the jurisdiction's advantage during COVID, because a lot of people were able to participate that otherwise wouldn't have been able to. I'd never encountered online staking before. They've got a great system.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Well, it seems to be the way to go these days. And there was great concern. It's actually when I was president of the PDAC, that was one of the big concerns that prospectors had. I remember I was invited to a meeting of the Porcupine Prospectors and Developers Association in Timmins one time. And that's essentially what they wanted to do. They wanted to, because PDAC was saying, look, we support online staking. And here's the reasons, because it allows this and everything else. But there were a lot of people at that time that were making huge money out of staking rushes because it had to be ground staked. And there were people that was their full-time job, was staking claims. And they were very, very concerned about it. As it turned out, luckily we had, and Ontario was after Newfoundland in transferring over to online staking. Luckily in Newfoundland, I had talked to most of the prospectors who did, and most of the guys that did the ground staking before I went there, and we'd had it in for 2 or 3 years. And I said to the guys in Timmins, I said, look, guys I've talked to in Newfoundland wouldn't go back to the old way because it's so much easier. They wasted so much time, so much money acquiring the ground by the ground staking. Don't need to do that anymore. That money can now, their time and energy can be put into prospecting the properties that they get. So, it was a bit of a rough ride that time in Timmins, but anyway, it ultimately, I don't think anyone would go back to the way it was. And it's an archaic system. This is so much easier defining your properties. It was always a difficult thing, knowing where the property lines were when you were staking. There was always little holes. And technically, then how do you handle those and things? And that could really make a difference, especially if a mine is right in that area.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it sounds like you see the more advantage than disadvantage over the online.
Oh yeah, I don't think this. Like I say, any jurisdiction I think that has it. I don't think anyone working in that jurisdiction would want to go back to the old system.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is with it, it does come down to computer savviness. It comes down to ability of having high speed Wi-Fi, as opposed to there's places in this island still have low speed, have dial-up. Well, there's no way you could compete in situations like that for a thing, and it's the only way you can stake. You have to stake online. So, that does bring up some concerns, but usually that only happens in a staking rush situation. I mean, problems like we would have in central Newfoundland and have had with staking around the Newfound gold stuff. Yeah. Because you get so many people going for the same piece of ground, you can actually crash the systems. So,
Yeah.
That's a difficulty, right?
I heard about that. Um, the system had crashed sometime a couple of years ago or something like that, but everybody was going after all the projects. So
Yeah.
yeah,
The ground is still not all open yet there, and the government is gradually opening it up again.
okay.
And so far, I don't think they've had any problems. So, hopefully that will
Mm,
come open soon, because that is prime ground. That's ground that Sean Ryan originally had. And
okay.
he dropped it to go into more specific areas. And most of that ground is owned by Labrador Gold,
Okay.
because he's involved with that. So yeah, so I mean, but he dropped it mainly because, well, he had done the original work there, and then a company called Torque had gone in and optioned it from them. They did some work, but their work was, I don't think their heart was ever in it. They were working. I think they're mostly up north somewhere now, but their follow-up was by biogeochemistry, which, it wasn't prospecting, it wasn't things like that. They had some good anomalies and stuff, and I am sure that's some of the ones that Lab Gold is probably following up now.
Is biogeochemistry when you test plants?
Yes, yeah. In this case, it would be probably spruce tips and things like that, right?
Okay. Yeah, I've never participated in that. I've heard about it. It's really early stage stuff.
Well, it isn't. I know of instances. I actually in '92 again, one of the first jobs I had was actually working with Gwendy Hall and Colin Dunn of the GSC. They had a project around the Rambler area to look at what the waters were like, and the biological part of it. Could it show the Rambler deposits and stuff? So they asked me, I went over and spent a couple of days with them, showing them around, because I'd known them from, I don't know where I knew them from, but anyway, I guess I knew them from somewhere, and spent 2 or 3 days with them going around. And then they said to me, look, we'll make an offer now. Would you work with us for a couple of weeks? We get 2 choices. We either hire you for a couple of weeks, or we use a helicopter for some of this stuff. So that means you're going to have to go into some pretty tough areas. And I said, well, I'm 92. I wasn't that old. So I said, well, no, okay, I'll go work with you. And that's what I did, was take a lot of these samples. And I think it did show areas of it. The biggest problem was the Rambler tailings are there, and they're not covered by water. So you will get dust off those. So the dust of the tailings, which was essentially copper, gold, silver, and stuff like that, was blowing everywhere. So you were getting a lot of uptake on that. That wasn't wasn't typical of the thing. It was man-made as such. Right? But yeah, I think it did do it. And I know Colin Dunn worked, once he left the GSC, worked with a group out in B.C, taking samples at the top of the trees, flying on with a helicopter, taking it. And they actually identified a massive sulfide deposit and drilled it.
Wow.
Using that. So,
Wow.
so it is something that can be used, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. One of those things in the toolkit, right?
Yeah, that's right.
We're doing it again where we talk a lot. We're gonna have to keep this up on a regular basis. I wanted to talk. I wanted to show. I have a cod.
Oh wow, that's a good one. That's very nice.
I love them. I don't think people don't. We talked about this off camera and off record. I think last time we talked about kissing the cod. It was recommended that I come up with a catchy title for the podcast, which I think I did, that would intrigue people. But it's a custom in Newfoundland and Labrador, and I wanted to come up with something that fit the place.
Right.
So, do you want to explain it? Because nobody, I'm thinking people from away aren't really familiar with it. And I thought,
and it's interesting because we just went, I think I was telling you last week, we did have this rehearsal dinner at our place for about 70, 80 people, and outdoors. And one of that was, this was my wife's cousin's daughter marrying a guy from Philadelphia. She had a basketball scholarship to University of Delaware, and he was on the University of Delaware team also. So of course he and his family, a lot of the American crowd were in Newfoundland, and they were at this reception party. And one of the things they set up for them was a screech-in. And a screech-in is a thing that is used to welcome come from aways, as we call them, or CFAs, to Newfoundland. Newfoundland, Labrador, as the province is known. And it consists of a number of things. First of it consists of saying a number of things that you have to do. And it starts off with things like, do you want to become a Newfoundlander? And you're supposed to respond, "Deed I do, my old cock, long may your big jib draw." and then part of the other, of course, you have to take a shot of screech, and you have to kiss a cod, or if you can't find a cod, as I think I mentioned to you, you can kiss the back end of a puffin. So all of which are good Newfoundland things to do. The other night in our backyard, the cod that the lady had that was doing the screeching was getting pretty gross. And I think I mentioned before, the week before out in Sokoman, when we had our AGM out there, we had a couple that hadn't been screeched in before, including a guy from New York who's a director of ours. And the same thing, we had a lady come in, do the screech in, and she had a pretty rank cod too. So I think that one you just showed me would be much more, would be much better for it. Although, yes, although not real, So
Yeah, I don't think it's valid, right?
no, probably not. No, but I'm sure people would like that a lot better than the one they get to have. But yeah, once you do that, you get the government has put out this thing, order of screechers, they call it, and they sign it. Whoever does it signs it on such and such a date. You actually became an honorary Newfoundlander. So it's an interesting custom. It's interesting that a lot of people in Newfoundland think it's belittling and don't like it and say it doesn't really do what we should be doing for the province and representing the province. My own feeling now, I'm a CFA, so it just doesn't necessarily go so far, but my feeling is it's all a bit of fun. The come from aways enjoy it. The interesting one of the best places in St. John's, and it's a bit of an advertising, is Christians. And the guy that the guy that passed away a couple of years ago, the guy that did that, going around the world visiting different places and that, he came here and he got screeched in there. And interesting how people like that, they really appreciate. It's not so much because you get the history, of the island as part of it. And I think that's what's really the important part of all of this. So yeah. I think it's a good thing to do. And I think everyone who comes here should do it. And you come to St. John's, you go on George Street, and there's lots of places you can get it done.
Yeah, I think, first of all, sometimes we take ourselves too seriously and we forget to have fun. And it's a nice way of coming together, right?
It is, yeah. It's not poking fun at anyone. I don't think I've ever run into anyone that has been screeched in that hasn't enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, you get to feel like you're part of the place, which is the intent, right?
That's right.
And my view is, respect local custom and tradition. It's there for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to heading to St. John's this year.
Well, I tell you, it's the way to do it. And of course, just a little bit of a side here too. I mean, the reason that the Broadway play, or the play that was done on the Gander situation, is called Come From Away, is because of that. That's where that comes from. Because if you're not from here, you're a come from away. And I've lived here pretty well most of my life anyway, and I'm still a come from away because I wasn't born here.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, but it is that type of thing. And really, when 9/11 happened and all those planes landed in Newfoundland, mainly in the Gander area, but also St. John's, Stephenville, it's those people. If you talk to most of them, while it was an unplanned stop, they were made so welcome. And they enjoyed it so much that a lot of them have come back since. There's people have come back here to get married. There's people who have come back just to see people again that they met while they were here. And it's for those that haven't seen it, I'll put a little plug in. Go see Come From Away. It's on in Broadway until I think October. And then it's finished. So there are still traveling exhibitions. They're all over the world right now. They're in Australia and things, different traveling parts of that. But if you haven't seen it, go see it, because it's a really good story.
Yeah, I remember it on the news, all the planes that landed, and the beautiful stories people had. Scholarships were set up by people for to give back, and just speaks to the beautiful people in a beautiful place of the world. And I'm happy to be getting to meet and share stories with a lot of people like you to others. And I'm trying to learn some of the sayings.
Some of this jargon.
What is jargon? Yes. Yeah, I was in Toronto at PDAC, and Gary Lewis came up to me and said something. I can't even remember what he said. I had no idea what he said. And so
the shortest, one of the things we have here, this is another little thing here, but one of the shortest discussions between fishermen. You ever heard that one?
No.
Okay, it's just one fisherman going one way, he's going down towards the water, and he's another fisherman coming back up. Guy going down the water yells, "Arn." The guy coming back up says, "Narn." That's it.
And what does that mean?
Arn, are there any fish?
Oh.
And the guy says, "Nar, narn, no, sorry, there's no fish." But I mean, 2 words, the whole story.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for your time today, Peter. I've enjoyed it. We have to do this again. I'll give you a break, and maybe later in the season we can chat about how things are going. And thank you so much.
I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. I think, like I said, these type of things, I don't know how people are doing. I assume these are on YouTube. Are they too? Yeah.
Anywhere that you get your podcast, Spotify, everywhere.
Okay.
And yeah, we're going to start pushing them out more as well. But it's there's so many great stories, so much happening there that people don't know about, that I just hope this helps.
Sure. Yeah. We have a folk festival on the go here in St. John's this weekend. That's the 46th annual folk festival. It's in Bannerman Park, which isn't very far from where I live there. And we get a lot of people in from outside on that too, from CFAs, as we call them. So I just hope it's a good weekend. We're getting rain today, but we needed it. It's been 2 weeks or so since we've had any rain. Everything was drying up pretty badly. So, but, we're having a good summer. So I encourage anyone that hasn't been here to come and see us, and we'll go from there.
I'll be there.
Good.
I'm sold. Well, thank you again, Peter, for joining us, and thank you to everybody for joining us at Kissing the Cod. Please come back and see our next guest. They're wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.